Hello gamers, welcome to another Zenless Zone Zero video. Today I'm here once again talking about, or yapping about Zenless. And well, today's gonna be about Jane Doe specifically, right? Everybody loves her. She's awesome, definitely one of the hottest gacha characters of all time. And well, as you can see this image, that amazing message I've gotten with one of Seth's in between frames. Very beautiful. But yeah, Jane Doe has a very interesting kit which allows her to do crit physical anomaly, right? So crit assault damage, which is very interesting, but also means a lot for her team building, right? As you are going to want to prioritize her being on field and actually doing the assaults. Now, granted, her passive does allow for any assaults to crit, but considering she's an anomaly character with high anomaly stats and based on her passive, you're going to want to build her and have her on field to do most of the uptime in terms of actually applying the anomaly, right? And there's a couple other ways you can make it take advantage of this for other characters, but it's really going to come up to a stats thing, right? I'm going to talk about that in this video. But first things first, her actual passive that matters. I'm using this website just for reference, right? Don't want to accidentally put anything that should not be shown here, but we can already see her kit in game, and also man, her mindscape is fantastic, but realistically should have taken more off. But that's besides the point. So the main thing that we're going to take advantage of here when building her team, right? Because it's an anomaly character, the multipliers themselves don't matter nearly as much, right? You could probably even leave the skills at low level and only level up the core skill. Because realistically, anomaly character, it's the stats that matter, not the actual talent, right? Because not a crit DPS. But with that being said, her core passive insight is whenever Jane hits an enemy, it causes them to enter the knowledge state and it lasts for 10 seconds. If any squad member, and again, any squad member, right, triggers assault on the enemy in the knowledge state, it increases the flinch effect, or it gives them the flinch effect, my bad. The flinch effect is increased by 5 seconds, and assault damage has inflicted can trigger a crit with a base chance of 40% and a crit damage of 50%. Each point of Jane Doe's crit, or sorry, I'm reading it wrong. Anomaly proficiency increases her crit rate by 0.16%. I don't know why I'm having such a hard time reading this. Jesus Christ. Uh, but yeah. So the reason why this is important is this means that any assault you do that crits is going to do 50% more damage, pretty much, right? That's pretty big because assaults are already the biggest raw damage number for anomaly, right? If we take a look at the spreadsheet here for like damage calculations, right? Go to the bottom so you guys can see the credit. The assault anomaly is the strongest for raw base damage, giving you a 713 multiplier of your attack raw, right? And the reason why that's important is that you're obviously going to build attack on top of this character, on top of the anomaly stats, and it's going to help with scaling everything else. And again, team building in terms of what you were looking for on her specifically. Additionally, it's going to also matter for your disorder base damage. I'll get into that in a minute, but just so you know, the biggest initial proc of damage for anomaly characters is physical anomaly. So this is a good thing for her in terms of her overall damage, right? Now, of course, technically shock does more total damage, but that's why it matters for disorder, and I'll get into that in a second. But first, the rest of her passive is her additional ability, Source Spot, whenever there's an anomaly agent or agent of the same faction. So this is going to be anybody in the PubSec faction or any other anomaly characters. Jane Doe's physical anomaly buildup rate is increased by 15% when the physical enemy, or sorry, when the enemy is already suffering from an attribute anomaly. Jane's physical anomaly buildup towards the target is increased by an additional 15%. So basically, she will give herself up to 30% increased anomaly buildup, which is going to be very potent for what she wants to do, and just in general, allowing her to build up fast and actually taking advantage of stuff like disorder, right? Now then, in terms of actual damage, what's it going to look like? Well, if we take a look at just some random stats I plugged into this sheet for calculating the damage, right? If we're going to assume it's a bulky enforcer like a big enemy, right? They've got 0 fizz resistance. Your character's level 60, all that good stuff. All right, you can see here's or their enemy stats, right? We got nothing going on here. This is just raw damage with 2,700 physical or attack, right? On physical. Granted, your attack is going to be like this at base with buffs and stuff. It's going to go up, but this is just like a raw base number, right? And 400 anomaly proficiency. Now you're going to be like, that's a crazy amount, but it's kind of easy to build. And this is realistically where you should be sitting at for an anomaly built character, especially because of her passive, right? Which I'll get into in a second. You're going to be hitting assaults for about 115,000, right? Give or take. Now, the best thing about this here is that you're going to be able to crit this. So this is going to be like 160,000 anomaly damage, which is going to be absolutely massive for your overall damage on the team and anomalies, right? Now, the reason why it's important is that we're going to be able to maximize this by giving her multiple series of buffs, like using Seth as an example. Seth is going to be giving an anomaly buff, which is also going to play into her passive more, which again, I'll read in a second, but that's just something to get it like frame of reference is that every few seconds of Jane Doe proccing her damage, you're going to be doing like 150,000 plus damage on a like decent build, right? You could, or you should be doing more ideally, as this is not factoring in buffs and stuff, but this is going to be a very strong character just based off purely this and how you combine it with other abilities. Now, granted, you could say, hey, that doesn't sound too good to me seeing the damage of other characters. When you combine everything together, it's going to be really, really good. And her critting is what's going to make physical anomalies sort of like a standout thing, right? Because right now, anomalies, people are like kind of, it's like kind of iffy on like how they function, right? This is actually going to be really good for like overall damage as long as you keep applying anomaly and the faster you do it, you're just going to get more and more damage. It's going to be really good, really consistent. And with Jane Doe in particular, you're obviously going to want to make sure you've got 100%, anomaly crit, right? If that makes sense. But moving forward, I want to talk about the weapons for her to actually use real quickly because the weapon scenario is going to be a bit weirder for her because she is wanting raw anomaly stats, and the anomaly weapons are not really, I would say, the best for the characters. They're kind of niche for each character, but you could also say that for every character so far in the whole game. So as for the 3-star weapons, you are going to be using most likely this one right here, the Bravo one. It's going to give you anomaly buildup, and it's obviously going to give you anomaly proficiency. You're probably going to be using this. Outside of that, it would be this one over here, the Alpha, which is going to give you anomaly mastery and base attack, right? But who really cares? It's a 3-star weapon. Nobody wants to use it. As for the 4-stars, right? Weeping Gemini and Rainforest Gourmet are probably going to be the two ones most people end up using, as they are going to give you flat, just flat anomaly proficiency and attack percent for your raw overall damage. And their passives are also pretty interchangeable. This one giving you attack percent up to 10 times based on your energy use. Now, granted, I'm not the biggest on that one because even though you're going to be using Jane Doe's skill, you won't have full uptime. And then this one will give you stacks of anomaly proficiency up to 4, and you get a pretty large amount. However, it will go away if the enemy is stunned or defeated. So it's going to be here or there in terms of how this one works, because again, this passive also won't have the best uptime. And then, of course, there are the other two 4-stars. There's going to be Piper's one, which, granted, this one's like okay, but you have to like get a bunch of hits of your EX special, and it's going to be a duration, right? For like 5 seconds. It's not the best. The reason why this is good on Piper, she has a hold EX special, right, where you just spin to win. This you're not going to really be proccing consistently, so it's going to not be as good as the other ones, although this have much higher base stats. So we'll really see once the math people get on this. I'm just, making estimations. I'm not going to do anything too crazy for this video in particular. And there's, of course, the Electro Lip Gloss one, which is going to be just in a weird spot because you have to have anomalies on the enemy to get the buff, but you for Jane Doe, right? If you do like a non-disorder team, it's gonna be just physical, right? And so if you ever drop your days or not days, if you ever drop the flinch buff, it's just gonna fall off. But this is not gonna be a bad weapon for her overall because as we read earlier, she is increasing the flinch effect by 5 seconds. So arguably this is gonna be her best 4-star, and it's not gonna be nearly as bad as it is on other like anomaly based characters. And again, this is gonna be matter more when anomaly characters get fleshed out more. But this actually looks to be like Jane Doe's, I'd say, probably best weapon, considering you'll have better uptime with it. We'll see how that plays out. And of course, there's Grace's weapon, which I'll be real, I don't think is going to be that crazy on her. It does give you a large amount of base attack and attack percent, but it's this line about whenever you hit a target with a special attack or EX special, you get anomaly proficiency, up to 3 times, right? The problem with this is that you don't really build pin ratio on Jane specifically. Now, the reason why this is good on Grace is because you could use her with Rena, and then stacking, your defense penetration buffs, right, are going to give you a large, amount of damage, right? With Jane Doe, a 24% pin by herself isn't going to be anything too crazy, right? We can do it here. If we go up to 24, right, you're going to see the damage is going to go up to 30, like 20k more. It's not that big a deal, right? Uh, in comparison, something that would give you like I don't know, let's say another let's just say 300 attack, right? You're gonna get like 3,000 attack, right? You're gonna see this goes up to a little bit lower than the equivalent to that, right? So it's not gonna be too crazy by itself. Now, when you stack defense penetration, it's obviously gonna get a lot higher. So let's just assume Marina's in the team, right? For comparison's sake, right? It's gonna be 24 plus another 29. I'm just gonna say 30. There's like some weird math numbers behind it. She doesn't actually give you 30 at M0, but again, 50, not, oh my god, 54, just for an example, right? You're going to see it's going to go up to 55, right? So you're going to be hitting like over 200k, assaults there whenever she crits, right? So you need to consider whether or not you're going to use this weapon over another one. It's going to matter a lot based on the characters you use her with, right? Uh, it's going to be here nor there. It's obviously going to be a very potent weapon, but you're not always going to have the passive active because Jane Doe doesn't combo her crit. Sorry, she doesn't combo her special attack as much as what's her name, Grace does, right? Because Grace combos it and all that stuff. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. But again, we've got some pretty competitive weapon options with your free to play option with the Rainforest one, and then the Weeping Gemini, and then of course the Battle Pass one is going to be her second best, alongside Grace's, right? So then finally we can get into the teams and the bulk of the theory crafting, right? Because I've already yapped about damage and all that stuff. So right here is something that I actually kind of got inspired by Mr. Pokey from, using Jane Doe with Nakamata. Now, my original thoughts of this character is I'm gonna do teams like this, right? We have Hyper, which is gonna be Jane Doe, Quinny, and a support character. Granted, we can debate all day every day about whether or not it's worth bringing a stun character for anomaly characters. It's really going to depend on how fast they are at stunning, and she's going to give you a massive 80% increased stun multiplier, which is going to be huge for your overall damage, right? If we just want to plug in an additional 80% here for the stun multiplier, right, that's going to take it up to 180 off of like a regular character, although realistically it's going to be 180, and the reason for that is because like a lot of enemies get a stun multiplier of like 200, right? And so we'd say 180. You're gonna see the damage skyrockets up to like 3 times the damage it was before, right? Now without her, right, if we just do a regular 100 stun damage multiplier, it's gonna be this, right? So she's gonna give you a very noticeable damage increase while they are stunned, right? And for that duration that they're stunned, your damage is gonna spike, right? It's gonna be a huge spike in damage. So there is gonna be in some scenarios actually a reason to run her, as a stunner on the team, because you'll get a huge damage spike for short duration. So if that short duration you can kill the enemy, great. She's basically the best option. But if it's like a prolonged fight and you're not having them stunned for X duration, realistically you may be better off running someone else, right? Just saying. But she could be a very solid option. And the other teams I was thinking of Fancy Rat, where it's Jane Doe, Grace, and Rena. This is your disorder team. This is going to be an okay team. The main reason you bring Rena is because Rena with Grace and her weapon is going to get a lot of benefit out of the defense penetration, because again, you stack defense pin and defense down, it gets better and better, right? And she's also extending the duration of shock, right? And the reason why duration of shock matters is what I mentioned earlier, is that it's going to increase your disorder base damage, right? So now whenever you go on field to quickly proc Grace's shock, Rena's going to get it buffed. Grace is going to buff it. You're going to have this really big shock damage multiplier, and then you're just going to clear it immediately with Jane Doe by swapping her in, and you're going to get that increased damage off on your disorder. So instead of it lasting for 7 seconds, right, with all these buffs active, and let's say they're even stunned as well, right? We're assuming they're stunned in this scenario, right? Instead of you're getting like I'm just rough estimate here, right? Because you take time to actually apply your buff. Instead of it being like 7 seconds, you're gonna get 10 seconds. You're gonna get a full this like shock proc off pretty much, and it's gonna be a huge, massive 500,000 something damage, right? On top of the fact that you're doing a 200. Well, if you crit, it's 50%, right? So you're gonna do like a 300,000, assault damage here. So if they're stunned and you've got Grace on the team and you've got Rena and you're stacking all of this, you're gonna do like a million plus damage with like one hit. Uh, assuming you do a disorder proc, right? And again, if we just want to factor in Grace, like Rena's 30% there, right? Insane damage numbers, right? And this is assuming you have all this, actually procced, right? A lot of times you won't have this procced, but your damage is going to go insane when you have all the buffs up on this team in specific, your Disorder team, right? So even though Disorder might not seem like the best with the fact that Jane wants all the field time in the world to actually crit, you still can get some really high nuke damage with this team in particular. So I think it's gonna be pretty good to run, right? And then past that, we have a Rat with a Bat, which is one that I think is funny, where it's just giga buffing Jane Doe as much as possible by giving her Seth and Lucy. Now Seth is going to be a shoe-in for like any support in this role. So like here, right, instead of running a uh generic support like I mean, realistically, I don't know who you'd run besides a Lucy because Lucy's the only like team buffer in this scenario, except for Rena, of course. But in this last slot, right, and even in this Grace team, in fact, you could just bring Seth. And the reason why is, well, what I mentioned earlier in the video, he's actually going to buff anomalies. So Seth at a max level, whenever you have his shield, on allies, you're going to get 100 points of anomaly proficiency, right? And so that's going to give you a lot of damage. And it's also going to work with Jane Doe's passive, giving you, X amount of points for triggering your assault, right? So instead of going from a 300 base crit or 300 base AP, you're gonna have like 400, for example, right? Or maybe even more in a really good build, right? So instead of having your generic 300, which is gonna give you, this much crit, right? It's gonna give you another 48 crit. You'll be at 88 crit with this. With Seth, right, you're gonna go up to 400, or again, even more on a good build, and it's gonna give you effectively 100% crit rate on your assault procs, right? Because you're now going to have, your max buff. So this is going to be really huge, and it's the main reason why you'd run Seth is there's effectively zero loss when running him, and pretty much only a net gain because he combos as a stunner. He's also going to give you resistance down for that anomaly, right? Or I believe it's for shock anomaly actually, and then also anomaly proficiency for everyone, right? And so if we want to look at the damage numbers real quickly, once again, right, we're gonna have to drop down the seconds on the on the disorder here, right? So obviously our damage is gonna drop because we no longer have Arena. However, you bring in Seth, right, and you jump the anomaly damage up to 500. You now see it's matching the damage basically, and so this isn't really so much against Arena, right? It's more so that Seth is just that good that he basically almost invalidates what Rena is doing on some of these teams, right? He's going to be very, very strong, right? And he's also going to bring other benefits besides that. The main thing here is that, so you see with his passive ability, at the end of his final chain attack, right, or the finishing strike of his basic, he's going to reduce the resistance of all anomalies, the build up by 20%. So you're going to be able to build it up even faster, right? And for this reason, Seth kind of replaces Rena on anomaly teams because you're hardly losing damage and you're getting just better uptime on buffs, right? Rena's pin buff is going to it's not gonna have the best uptime unless you got like M1. It's gonna have much better uptime. But Seth is just gonna have a flat out like for 25 seconds, you get, 100% more damage. So Seth is just insane as a 4-star, and it's gonna combo into all of Jane Doe's teams. It's gonna be he's basically like kind of the best anomaly support in that regard, right? As you can see by the numbers and everything. And then if we look at Seth's Mindscapes real quickly, you get an increase in shield. Your passive lasts longer for the anomaly buff, so it's going to have even better uptime. He's going to reduce the or he's going to increase anomaly buildup on his own electric proc. So even if you don't run Grace in the team, Seth is going to build up anomaly stats on his own, and it's going to be really strong, right? So you can build Seth as like a hybrid stunner anomaly character and do a ton of damage because he's going to proc distortion for free, right? So let's say you're not even running Grace and you're just running one of the other teams, but then you run Seth, right? Or like the Seth Lucy team. Seth can basically solo build up shock, and then you still get your disorder proc for free, right? This is why Seth is crazy, is because he's shocked. You'll get the free disorder guaranteed. You just run like normal, right? Now, of course, there is going to be a damage loss if you disorder in reverse order. So instead of applying shock first, you apply the daze or flinch first, and then Seth does it. You're going to lose a massive amount of damage in case you don't know, right? Burn, shock, and corruption are good primers, while shatter and assault are not good primers for disorder damage. I just want to point that out that it could also work in the opposite direction, right? But then furthermore, Seth is going to be able to get a huge attack bonus with a guaranteed crits at his 6th dupe. So you're going to have some really good synergy with Seth, right? He's just going to be a great option for her. This video basically was just it's honestly a Seth Glaze video, guys. I'm sure somebody's going to be like, aren't you the guy who's pointed out or talked about Arena not being being on Fraud Watch in the other video and all that stuff. But regardless, you know what I'm saying, right? There's a lot of like good here in terms of Jane Doe and like her banner, but then also the fact that both these characters are going to be really strong overall, right? So I've yapped about all that. There's still more to talk about, right? But I'm gonna try to wrap this up here. So in terms of other beneficial units for her, basically everybody down here is not gonna be good on a team with her, for various reasons. They either require field time or single target based characters like Sakaku's buff, or they just have their own teams, right? And so basically nobody here is gonna benefit her or their main DPS characters. And then like Nicole, for example, right? She's got really she doesn't have the best uptime with her buff, and 3 seconds is not enough to really benefit off of this, especially when you have a character like Seth who's effectively going to have 100% uptime on just 100% more anomaly damage, right? Or 100 AP, which is the equivalent of 100% damage percent, right? So again, it's going to be much better to run him. But furthermore, this is where I mentioned Mr. Pokey earlier. He gave me the idea of putting Nekomata with Jane Doe and running in a team that's effectively your buffer. So, like, let's just say Lucy, for example, or even Seth, right? With Jane Doe and Nekomata. Running Nekomata is like a burst DPS where she's just popping in to use her EX skill and her ultimate for big crits while building up your physical anomaly and allowing Jane to crit on top of that, right? This is actually going to be a really good team that I didn't even think about when I originally like was looking into this character. Uh, but I do think there's an option that would work pretty well, and I would say he definitely was cooking in that regard. The only issue there again is that third teammate slot, right? It's basically going to be a stunner, right? Well, ideally it'd probably be this. So you probably do Nekomata, Jane Doe, and then Quinny, who's going to allow you for insane burst damage, where you just pop in nuke with like multiple crit assaults, and then Nekomata, and it's going to do insane damage in a really good burst. So it's gonna be that nuke based team, or you run Seth just to boost Jane Doe's damage, and Nekomata is just there to do additional damage, right? Another option again would be Lucy, who's gonna buff both of them, and especially once she gets M2, she'll have really good uptime, getting it on chain attack, so you'll have pretty decent buff synergy there, right? And then Rena isn't really gonna do anything on that variant of the team. Of course, for that same reason though, you can do a combination of Corrin or Billy in those slots as well, as they are both, also bursty DPS characters. And then if you do run Corrin, it would allow you to kind of run Rena. There's really not a point there, but it would just be proccing Corrin's passive. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, uh, it gets procced anyways, right? Because she's a physical character. I think, is it the same elements? Yeah, okay. So you wouldn't even want to run Rena in that team in the first place. Yeah, you'd be better off running Seth in that team specifically. Which again, this isn't like the hate watch Rena or whatever, but Seth would be a better option if you run Corrin. Purely because the AP you get would be able to buff both of them, and so you wouldn't see a damage loss without her passive up, right? So yeah, Seth would be a better option in the Jane Doe Corrin team, and it's gonna be the same thing with Billy, right? Just for reference. Additionally, though, we have the distortion team I already mentioned. You could do either one of these. Now, again, there is the problem I said earlier with doing this shock distortion in reverse, or sorry, physical distortion in reverse. If you use the physical as the primer, you'd lose out on damage versus priming with one of the elemental characters, right? And so while you could do a double anomaly team with Burn Ice or Grace, it might not be the best, but as we've covered in this video, you can get really high damage if you do at least prime with one of the other characters, right? And then of course there's the option of doing another hyper variant, which is going to be using Caesar. Caesar is physical, and so you'll get the passive or if you've looked at the sussy info, you'll get your passive proc here, and you can still do really good damage. And so this is going to be another hyper Jane where you run Seth, Caesar, and Jane Doe. It's going to be a pretty good setup for that same reason, right? It's just like the other setup. You're just giga boosting Jane Doe, and outside of Quinn Yi, this is going to be your other like general use setup. And in fact, you could argue that that's going to be like her second best team, running her plus Caesar plus Seth, but we'll have to see the number crunches and like actual in-game testing, for that, application, right? And then another option is going to be her plus Piper and plus Lucy. There's just going to be an option where it's just spin to win effectively, right? All characters are getting buffed, from their passives. They're all procced. You're getting nice damage percent from Piper for everybody. Lucy's also giving you attack. You're getting your guard board damage in, your bamboo damage even. And Jane Doe's just getting giga juiced by the fact that she's getting Piper's 18% buff for a duration. You're gonna get the other physical damage boost, and you're always proccing physical anomaly, right? So this is also going to be a pretty solid option, and it would even allow you to actually use the ultimates, which again, because of the talent level scaling, the ultimates on anomaly characters aren't that big a deal, but it would actually allow you to on field Jane Doe and then constantly swap in between these two for just some really solid damage, right? And that's basically it. So yeah, that basically covers all the Jane Doe theory crafting I've got going on. She looks to be a very strong character that's pretty relatively flexible, but she's also sort of introducing a new archetype of having a hyper carry anomaly character, right? Because right now, the only two anomaly carriers we have, Piper is kind of like a hyper carry, but she doesn't have another teammate, and now she's going to have another teammate, right? That's going to allow Piper to crit, right? So if you're already impressed with Piper's damage, well, now you can crit on your Piper, right? Or crit on your Jane Doe and have even more damage with these two together. And again, it's going to give Grace another option, which is going to increase her value overall, right? And as we covered previously, Grace is one of the more valuable, standard characters, so that's pretty nice. And yeah, that's basically it for this video, right? Hopefully this video helps you people decide what to do with your Jane Doe. I'm sure somebody's asking about disk drives real quickly. You're going to be using two-piece Fanged Metal and then two-piece, what is it? Freedom Blues. That's gonna give you AP, right? You want this AP just for the passive purely, right? So yeah, hopefully this video helps people to figure out what to do with their Jane Doe. I think she's gonna be really good. Again, there's a lot of stuff going on here that's gonna be really good for your overall damage and synergies with other characters. So yeah, hopefully this video helps. I don't got much more to say. I'm gonna wrap it up here. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, check me out on Twitch, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.